Hello, everyone watching on YouTube and listening on Spotify. It's another episode of NRG Insights. For those that don't know, we speak to influential people within the mortgage and specialist lending market who can offer, as the podcast suggests, some insights into the market.
Quite a sort of unusual journey in terms of I'm one of those sort of typical people that really did fall into it. I was sort of early to mid 20s. I didn't go down the uni route. Sort of did a bit of college here and there, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I think sort of got to my mid 20s and knew I wanted to sort of start something new. So that was the kind of start of my financial career. And I actually got a job within an asset management firm, fairly small, fairly boutique, that raised money for high net worth investors, ultra high net worth. And those funds were invested within collective investment vehicles. And essentially, that was linked to bridging. So I am one of those people that certainly didn't wake up and think, I want to be in the bridging industry. It was literally thrown on me. And to be honest, I've done a various number of roles since then that are all bridging linked, but not necessarily as a direct lender as I am now.
I'm interested. You said that in 2008. Was that a weird time to go into any sort of financial? Or did you not feel it because you weren't in it before?
100%. You're right. And I think I was actually really lucky with the timing because actually back then bridging had a bit of a stigma to it, certainly. There was far fewer lenders. I think there's sort of 195 odd lenders now. And I think at the time there was probably only sort of 4 or 5, 2 or 3 sort of main players.
Yeah.
And it was extremely expensive. You only really lent to sort of either real high net worth or people with really bad credit that couldn't raise money from the banks and the high street banks. And obviously the crash 2008, 2009 was really where bridging really sort of came out. It was the one sort of industry that really started thriving because high street banks weren't lending, private banks weren't interested, and that short-term risk wasn't really something that people wanted to take on board. So that was kind of the initial evolution of where bridging came from. There are there's lots of guys in the industry that worked sort of early, mid-2000s in it, but it was slightly different. It was structured differently. Again, a little bit more loan sharky as opposed to what it is now, which is a mainstream product within the mortgage cycle.
We'll talk about that later, actually, about the stigma behind it, because it does take a while for people to understand it's not a bad product. I think, especially for brokers, I think if they don't get it, they think it's for people that can't get a term mortgage or something like that. It's a strange stigma to it.
It's changed so much, and I feel like I've sort of almost been part of that whole journey, but it's given me huge opportunities all the way through. So if we go back to 2008, 2009, it was asset finance. And actually I, as part of one of the companies, used to fund one of the old bigger bridging lenders that actually ended up sort of unfolding and due to a number of different reasons, which I won't go into too much detail. And that's actually funny enough where I met Phil Mabb. So Phil was my first sort of mentor, the one other guy that isn't really so prominent in the industry, but does work within the industry still, raising money, but probably isn't as well known, a guy called James Allen. But I also worked with Phil on an asset wind down. And that was sort of 2011, 2012. But that was all linked to that asset management company and how that sort of went bad. And then it was about a 150, 200 million pound asset wind down. So when I refer to how lucky I was thrown in the deep end as a junior, and I was doing things that a lot of people in my position generally wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. And so, you talk about that sort of throwing yourself in the deep end, and that was exactly what happened with me. And, I did my best. I worked really hard. I was very driven because, of course, I found something that I really enjoyed and something that I was relatively good at the time, as far as I thought. So I was pretty green and probably made a million wrong decisions, but kind of was forced to make those decisions, actually. I go back to Phil's relationship. Phil was brilliant because he's very disciplined, knows bridging and development inside out as a lender, as a broker as well. And so very sort of multifaceted, knows the front end, knows the back end, knows how to lend on development finance, and knew everything. So he was my sort of core bridging mentor. And so I worked for this investment company from 2008 through to 2012 when it kind of started unraveling, i.e. not so much with us, but with the lender, one of the big lenders that we worked with at the time. And that was when I moved into the wind down stage. And so we did that for a sort of year or two, and actually was contracted into that for a long time via some of the big UK London lawyers. And that was a huge eye opener and probably, again, another story within itself. But over time, that led me to sort of into the investment side via a stockbroking firm where some regulated investment collective property schemes were put together. And actually, we had three bridging lenders at that point, and one of those was Paul Mumford at Century. And so we did that for a year or two, but it didn't really take off how we wanted it to take off. And so that was really the evolution into Paul coming to me and saying, look, do you fancy coming over and doing direct lending? I think that was back in 2013. And yeah, that's when I sort of jumped ship from the investment side or the asset wind down side into the sort of.
And you worked with Paul for a number of years, right?
I did, for about 4 or 5. Still, obviously, we still catch up now and then. And my partner Guy is, fairly good friends with Paul as well now. So yeah, I worked for him for about 4 or 5 years, I think. Still see him knocking about, of course.
Tell me about your journey briefly in financial services to how you've got to national account manager at Hope.
Yeah, so I started in probably it was January 2017. I actually worked in construction before, so as you know, I probably filtered between jobs and different careers, from roofer and welding, lead work. There was actually one that I never told you. I used to chap doors and sell roof and wall coatings too. So it was sales. But you can imagine
that's the best learning, though.
100%, and that's what helped me. And honestly, Marcus, I'm not joking when I say this. I remember champing the first door, and I was shaking. My life. But
so the first time you got the phone.
Yeah, honestly, 100%. And the thing is, it gives you a little bit of armor. Once you've done it once, you do it twice, then you do something else. It's easy, it's easier. But done that, from there, 2017, I actually done an apprenticeship with Barclays. I've had enough with construction. There was no end goal for me. I wasn't liking it.
Yeah.
So started there at 27, took a massive wage hit. But I was looking kind of forward. And I completed a relationship managing in LIBF, RCBC. Always mixed up with me. Don't worry about that. I completed that with Barclays and worked there for 4 years between Glasgow and Liverpool. So that gave me like the baseline for customer service, really. That gave me the baseline. And
but banking's a good position to start in. They teach you like the compliance, looking after the customer, how to do things properly, don't they? It's a nice.
Honestly, see, when you're there, like anybody will tell you, I can't be bothered with this. This is honest, but see, when you move into another role, when you've been there and you've learned it, what you take from there is second to none. Bring that.
It's the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, isn't it?
100%. And you don't actually realise how much you've learned, as in speaking to people and knowing how to structure stuff, and it brings it all to different roles. Obviously, you move into like where I am at the moment at Hope. I didn't know anything about bridging, for example, but at the baseline of customer service, wanting to learn and the drive to do it. And for me, attitude's a lot better than kind of knowing it, in my opinion.
Yeah. But let's talk about that, actually, because you moved up the ranks quite quickly, haven't you? You've moved, having said that, it was funny when you see people that moved up the ranks quickly, because you also did your time at Barclays. Like, you've done a bit of hard graft before, and then you had to take a massive wage cut to get where you are now. And obviously, now you're rich and smashing in. Nailing the business over. But in a short space of time, though, aren't you?
This hoodie's about 30 quid, mate. Trust me, there's no...
it's covering up your really expensive necklace underneath, don't it? The diamonds.
But yeah, in a short space of time, I've kind of went up along as the companies grew. So I started as a BDE, literally on the phone, speaking to people, doing terms. But I knew before it that I had the drive to kind of where I was going. So I was doing over and above what I was doing to get where I had to be, where I am.
That's the magic, isn't it? Do the job. Act as if you're already doing it.
That's it.
That's it. You get a bit further.
And then there was they don't really, not saying they need to interview people, but I was always in mind for the next role and the next role, and that's what I've got it. So started there as a BDE. Within five months, even before my probation, I was promoted to senior BD, and then from there, BDM, and then from BDM to national account manager.
My original background was working for another lender. So I went to uni, I did my master's degree in China. I came back home, just like everyone else. I was kind of twiddling my thumbs, kind of blindly applying for various graduate roles to very little.
When was that, Ash? What year was that?
So that would have been 2012. And I think I've told this story before. I'm one of the last people in the generation to get a reasonably successful career out of applying for a job in a newspaper. And I'll tell you why. It's because my mum saw it.
12?
Yeah. My mum saw it, and she was like, "I'm going to apply for this job for you," because I think she was sick of having me sat at home. So to a very great extent, I owe my career to date to my mum. She came to the interview. A couple of stages of the interview went really well, and I joined a local development finance lender in 2012. And I came, obviously, like most people, not knowing anything about short-term lending, property development finance. I don't think anyone has ever left uni and thought, I can't wait to get my teeth into property lending.
I can't wait to do financial services. I always tell this story, right? But the only person that genuinely did is Sandeep Patel, because all of his family work weekends, and he found out that financial services, you didn't have to work weekends. He's genuinely the only person that said, no, I wanted to do it when I left uni. I'm like, really? Everyone says, they fell into it.
He's definitely the first I've heard of. Look, I think virtually the fact that not many people know the market is there. I think they think of banking, I think they think of mortgages, but they don't think of specialist lending. Which
I don't even think they think of mortgages either. I just think we'll talk about that more later, but it's a great industry to get into, and people just don't know about it. They don't know, like you say, you leave uni, no one's waxing lyrical about no one really understands how money works. We're not taught it, so we don't understand that these guys aren't just rich builders. They need finance and that kind of thing, and it's the interesting side of the market.
Absolutely. And when it came down to it, I had what's the choice? I had really got quite far in a graduate scheme for a large biscuit and confectionery manufacturer, or property finance. And so it was either this or spending my life in a factory, kind of probably doing numbers of stock and stuff like that.
This or biscuits. It doesn't make it sound like it's
And I've had enough biscuits in my life, to be honest.
So sorry, I interrupted, but you were 2012. You got to dev finance, and then from there.
Yeah, so I joined Regents Media, a great short-term lender who'd been around for a long time, had a great reputation. I was fortunate enough to work in a very flat management structure. So over the next 5 or 6 years, I was able to do some fairly high-level stuff for someone my age. I got an opportunity in 2015, 16 to run the business alongside my current business partner, Sam Howard, who was also a director in Regents Mead, which we made work for a couple of years. So Regents Mead was quite unusual because it was predominantly a property group and a medical research charity that had a lending arm, like a trading business.
That's an obvious connection, yeah. Medical research,
exactly.
Lending, yeah. I don't know why I didn't make the connection before.
So that's where a lot of the money was going, and we were just lending a private individual's money. And we got to 2017. I think he was, approaching 80, and he said, "You know what, boys, I don't want the stress of dealing with this. I'm almost 80. I don't need the hassle." We were still young enough that we quite enjoyed the stress of dealing with it. So with his blessing, we moved the team 5 minutes down the roads. Same core bank of clients, same core bank of borrowers. New investor, a funding line from Shawbrook Bank, which I think we were one of the first new lenders to ever get a line with Shawbrook straight out the traps. So that was quite a nice compliment to us and the reputation we had. Then away we launched, and we've been slowly building since 2018, building a loan book. We're now at 12, 13 staff. We are based in Mill Hill in North London. And I think we've, again, it's for us coming into a really crowded market already, like bridging, development finance. There's lots of different lenders. There's lots of money still there. You've got to try and do things a bit differently and take yourself out for the crowd, especially if you're not going to compete on pricing and you're not going to compete on risk. But the beauty of development finance is there's lots of different areas you can compete on, whether it's genuinely, I hate when people say fast and flexible. And
what's your USP? Fast.
Yeah, fast and flexible. And it's the one thing I tell my BDMs, it's like, for whatever you do not go into a sales meeting and say we're fast and flexible. In fact, those words are banned. I'm going to use them anyway. Because what does that mean is, in practice, you can actually, if you can demonstrate it to your brokers and to the end user in practice, that's a big difference between saying you're fast and flexible. And I think there's lots of lenders that say they are and genuinely aren't at the end of the day.
I think I got into law just straight from school. I went to university, did a law degree, the standard way you get into it. And then I qualified into banking and finance. That was my background. I'd always wanted to be a lawyer. Actually, there's like a little, memoirs from when you're a kid. And I think I was 8. And I wrote something and it was like, when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer because I want to help people. And I want one of those cars with doors that go up and down. I think I was thinking about, is it a Lambo?
The Goldwing doors, yeah.
Yeah, I do help people, but I don't have a Lambo. So
you can get that on a Tesla now, so you could be eco-friendly and still get those Goldwing doors.
I'm too disorganized for a Tesla, but I'd break down everywhere. So that's yeah. So I always wanted to do law, got into law, qualified, like cutting the long story short, but qualified into banking and finance, where I actually used to sue banks for things like fraud, misconduct, negligence. So if you think of like the LIBOR rigging claims, I used to work on those, swaps, collars, caps, any sort of dodgy banking behavior. And there was a time when there was
I know someone well who works on the other side who just tries to reduce the fines for banking. I was like, you're the worst corporate lawyers in the world. You are. You guys are trying to get hidden pension money and stuff. And he's like, my whole job is basically trying to reduce. Like, that seems like a 200 million seems a bit harsh. Maybe 160, and that's his job, is to reduce the punishments for the banks. That's a tough corporate gig.
Yeah, so I always acted for the small guys. I love an underdog story. So I always acted for property developers. Primarily, like global, I don't know if you heard about RBS, Global Restructuring Group. RBS was smashing up property developments, taking all the assets. I won't get too far into that. But I've always acted for the property developer or the small guy against the banks. I was often asked, like, would you go to the dark side? Absolutely not. Sorry, my banking friends, but at that time, no. Yeah. So that's where I started off. And once I qualified, I was working at a law firm. I actually am from Dorset. Well, I was born in London, but I lived in Dorset at the time. And then I went up to a law firm in Southampton. It was really at the time. Funny, anybody who's visually watching this, how I'm dressed right now. I used to be in killer heels, suits, blazers. Like, I loved it. I was like, look at me, I'm a lawyer, that kind of vibe. And so it was really following that kind of corporate journey. And then I actually had this kind of life epiphany. At the time, I'd gone to a firm in Southampton, which was a city firm, and I was having panic attacks at the time. So I speak quite openly about a lot of these things. There's nothing really you can't ask me. And at the time I was having these panic attacks and was like, nothing's wrong with me. Which, if we want to get into that, we can chat about that some more. But started kind of on this hypnotherapy journey, the spiritual journey, unearthing things that, particularly people in like business, finance, law just don't look at. They don't want to look at that stuff, right? So started that, and then at the time I launched a wellbeing retreat company, and I went to the partner at the law firm and said, hey, this really changed my life. I want to launch this wellbeing retreat to help other people like me. And he was like, Anastasia, we all know you're really good at business development. You're really good at bringing in work. And that sounds like you want to do more of that. I was like, no. This isn't bringing in work. This is helping people. And he was like, Anastasia, you're just a bit of a square peg in a round hole, which for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it means you don't fucking fit in around here, you're not part of our crew.
It's not billable hours. They're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. You're a bit weird, So I was like, okay. So I handed my notice in. There's a point to this story. I handed my notice in. I then was I was like 27 and handed my notice in, became a consultant solicitor. Remember my mum at the time saying to me, don't tell your dad, love, all this hard work. And I've just, blown out the wall, like, sod them, And became a consultant solicitor. I was also doing consultancy work for a brokerage at the time, helping them with their business development because that's something I'm good at. And kept hearing people calling us like, I said, I need ILA. Obviously, I'm a banking lawyer. So I was like, cool, I can do ILA. And then I'd hear the brokerage, we can't complete because we need ILA. And I was like, what is this problem that no one's doing anything about? Like, can no one hear what's happening here? And I actually am a co-founder, so I'm not sole founder, I'm a co-founder of ILA. So I said to my, I actually trained with Luke Baldwin. He's my co-founder. I trained with him as a lawyer for a long time. He was at the brokerage. I was like, we we need to make a law firm that just does ILA, because no one's, this is nuts. This is huge. There's so much stuff to do here. And Googled it, and no one had ever done it. And law firms don't really have it on their website. And I was like, either this is a really bad idea, or I'm a genius.
Nailed a niche. Yeah.
You know, I'm not actually a genius. But you know what I mean? You're like, wow, what is that?
It is. It is when you look at like how, especially with law firms, it's such a small part of it, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But if you niche down into something, I mean, that's the same as any service, right? Whether it's recruitment, financial services, legal. You niche down into something, you become an expert at that one thing. That's all people come to you for. It's smart.
Yeah. So we kind of identified that gap, and actually, part of the story I often miss out, but actually it's a huge part of the story, is prior to COVID, ILAs could only be in person. So if I launched a law firm in Dorset doing ILAs in 2021, whenever COVID was 2022, wasn't it? So if I'd launched it in 2021, it would have been a load of rubbish. I would have been doing, a handful of developers in Poole. But COVID had just happened and ILAs had just started coming online. And I was like, if we launched this, we could service the whole world. And the banks were pushing more for limited, everyone was pushing more for limited companies. The developers were pushing more, and then the banks were pushing more for PGs. So I was like, this could be massive. I remember Luke saying to me, he's like, Anastasia, what if it goes back to in person? We're screwed. And I was like, but what if it doesn't go back to in person? Think of that, And it never did. And then we launched Isla in 2022.